The topic for this video is using a Linux operating system in your computer and general maintenance for a Windows system. For most of us, we just want to go on the internet and use our computers without any hassles, without learning much about the inner workings of this machine. However, once we start to download files from the internet, then the issue can turn into a nightmare. For example, I downloaded Firefox from a bad website. Firefox is reputable. This website that I downloaded Firefox from wasn't. I now have a browser virus that I can't get rid of. I'm coping with this problem. However, the virus is still a nuisance. I have been told that there are programs for removing these things. I still haven't been able to find a solution. We need to download things from the internet, and there are so many helpful places to get this help. However, good products can also be taken by corrupt people. Corrupt people take free software and give it to you from their own website bundled with viruses. That is why the subject of computers is very important. That is why I have decided to make this video. It is important to note that when you try to attempt to do what I'm about to show you, you can do harm to your computer, and you should take that into account. I have been told that having two operating systems for a computer is the best solution for some people. If you already have a computer that has Windows operating system, then you can install a Linux and have two operating systems. Since the time I got the browser virus, I have been asking around to see if there are solutions to such problems of getting viruses. I learned that with a Linux operating system there is no risk of getting viruses. That is the reason I have decided on having a dual system. That means Windows and Linux on the same computer. I have been told that by using a Linux system I don't need to worry about viruses coming into my computer. A Linux system is more efficient. The option of having dual booting seems to be the best choice. If you do decide on having both Windows and Linux, then you have to learn to deal with both operating systems. Virus removal software is not needed on a Linux and on a Mac, but you do need to do maintenance on your Windows system. Windows maintenance include regular cleanup, disk defragment, CCleaner, error checking, plus many more. For Windows there are virus removal softwares like Lavasoft and Spybot that may remove some viruses. They don't remove all viruses, but they do make your computer run slow. As for Linux, I have not yet installed it, but I will do that pretty soon. I have Samer Hussein giving me his opinion on this issue. Samer has helped me a lot. Here is one of his comments about the efficiency of a Linux. On Windows, I only have installed CCleaner, which is fast and free. On Linux, none of this software is actually needed. To be perfectly honest, Linux has a different way of handling the system register than Windows, and it also doesn't store any files like Windows does. When an application is removed, it is removed permanently. The example that I will be using for this video is my computer. Here are the details. It is not a new computer. I bought it used. It is an IBM. My computer, the operating system is Windows XP version 2002, and the capacity it has is 37.2 GBs. With Linux, you can play games and watch videos. If you want to play games on Linux or use different software and videos, Samer made a comment that I will read to you. Most of the Windows apps, including the most demanding games, can run on Linux with help of Wine library. Some, however, won't run or will run with semi functionality only, but generally most of the frequently used Windows apps run without trouble with newest version of Wine. You need Wine for using some applications. Summer is using Elementary OS in his computer. Elementary OS is a version of a Linux operating system. OpenGL benchmarks run faster on Linux. OpenBenchmark is a 2D, 3D graphics software. Videos are good on Linux. X.org is a video streaming server. Vast majority of Linux distros ship with X.org and GStreamer as their integral parts. So you can watch videos and play games and use all kinds of software with Linux. Virus removal software is not needed on a Linux and on a Mac. However, if you do decide on a dual system of having both Linux and Windows, you need virus removal software. Spybot is one of them, Lavasoft is another, but these make your computer run slow. There is another comment from Sama regarding virus removal. As for Windows, I've been using evaluation version of fprot and Kaspersky, which act as your computer first aid kit with limited functionality for no more than 30 days. I never really used any of this antivirus software while using Windows only, as it only slows down your computer, which already suffers from poorly optimized Windows libraries, with rather limited access to your real hardware capabilities. The best thing to avoid viruses and malware on Windows is to not use P2P and not to browse suspicious websites. I must say that my first elementary installation was rather unstable and kept crashing and freezing. However, after the last update, now it works like a charm and even more stable than Windows despite its beta state. As for Linux and Macs, pretty much every Linux distro is also made for Macs and can be dual booted with OS X. Now whether Linux or Mac is better, this is up to you and your needs. It is generally believed that if you cannot afford yourself to buy a Mac, then Linux clearly is your best alternative. There are, however, many advantages of Linux over Mac. The 3D graphics support in Linux is far superior to Mac, and input-output device compatibility is sometimes more up-to-date too. This is one of the most advantageous things about Linux. The compatibility drivers are often included in the kernel itself, so you won't need to manually install the drivers like you often need to on Windows. The other positive thing is that Linux is open source and runs on pretty much every hardware. Mac OS X, on the other hand, will only run on Mac computers, with the exception of emulators and visualization software whose configuration you cannot modify or change. So if you want to build a computer configuration according to your particular needs, then Linux is your better choice. If If you're going to leave Mac out of the game, then Windows plus Linux dual booting is your best choice. You can install multiple Windows and Linux installations on a single computer. Just make sure that you first install Windows and then Linux so you won't lose Linux. Dual booting. If you do decide on having both Linux and Windows on your computer, that means you will be dual booting. You need to create an empty partition for your new OS. Most Linux distros install fine on 40 gigs space. According to some even 20 gigs is enough. We have partition for drive C and D. Now we need to create another partition drive. Yes, another drive. Just allocate some space. You can do this through Windows disk management, but you can also do this while installing your Linux distro or Linux system. Back to my computer now. I will have to use one of these very tiny and lightweight Linux distros. We need to leave at least 4 gigs of free space to Windows to operate manually. Should be fine for Ubuntu or even Mint. Tiny Linux distros could also fit on drives with less than 10 gigs of space available. I wanted to mention that FileHippo is a reputable site for downloading software. From FileHippo you can get a lot of good software like CCleaner, Skype, Avis, Firefox, Google Chrome, Internet Downloader, and many more. Important comments made by Samer Hussein. Debian is too complicated for beginners. He should try Debian derivative instead. Elementary OS. If you want something like Mac, then you definitely have to try Elementary OS. Linux Mint. Similar to Windows, then you will have to try Linux Mint. Mint is renowned not only for its very good interface, but also for being technically very well maintained. Comes with all major apps already pre-installed and updated during the installation itself. Linux compared to Windows. Linux is a bit different from Windows. More similar to Windows, then try Zorin OS. Having both Linux and Windows. One thing, however, is highly recommended: dual booting. In case, for example, that Linux fails, you still have Windows. But know one thing: if you reinstall Windows, then you will lose Linux because a bootloader will be replaced with Windows.